Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky, alongside my trusty co-host and friend, Dwight Brown of Salary.com. Hello, Dwight.
Hey, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great because today we are speaking to Alexandra Levit, who is the president and CEO of Inspiration at Work, which is a woman-owned consulting company. Alexandra, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, David and Dwight.
Thanks for being here.
It is our pleasure. So, Alexandra, tell us a little bit about Inspiration at Work and about yourself.
Okay. Well, I am a futurist, specifically in the workforce domain, and most people do not know exactly what that means, and that's okay. I like to explain it pretty simply as a person who looks at trends that are percolating up through the market, through society, through the business world, and in our case, the workforce, to make an educated determination about what has the greatest potential for disruption. And so I work with both organizations and individuals to ascertain, okay, well, knowing you want to be gainfully employed or you want to be gainfully in business for the next several years at least, what are the types of things that you need to do to be adequately prepared? And my landscape is typically around 5 to 10 years. I try not to go too far beyond 10 years because I think that so many things can happen. There's so many external variables that it gets a little murky. But I think if we pay attention to the signals around us, and if we are willing to challenge our cherished assumptions about what we know to be true, I think that oftentimes we can be pretty accurate with these forecasts.
That's really cool. And I think we're going to spend most of the episode today talking about that. But before we do, like we ask all of our other guests, what's one fun thing that no one knows about Alexandra?
I mean, there's a couple, but I guess if I was going to pick one, I would say that I bowled competitively as a child.
Ooh.
I had this 6-pound ball. I kid you not, it was 6 pounds. And I was this tiny little person, and I was on the circuit competing in bowling tournaments. And it's funny, people are always like, well, are you a good bowler now? And it's one of those skills that's not like riding a bike. You absolutely lose the skill. And I'm on an adult bowling league now, but I'm so horrifyingly inconsistent. My team hates me. I'm that person who could either bowl a 90 or a 190, depending on the day. Nothing seems to affect
average. That's why we use average.
Right. Exactly.
That we,
Lies, damn lies, and statistics, right?
Well, so there's a bowling alley not far from me that I love to go to, and the people there are wonderful. And I am so... They keep asking me, why don't you join a league? And then they watch me for the three games I bowl. And, you know, to your point, one could be a 200. Mm-hmm. The next one could be a 105. And the next one's like 140. And they're like, what is going on with you? Well, first of all, as I get older, and I think you may have seen this too, Alexandra, I have tennis elbow. And so pieces of me stop reacting as well, or I can't be as consistent because I get a pain somewhere, you know. And
yeah, that's absolutely accurate. And once you start hurting in a place, like, it's very hard to keep going because it's the same motion over and over. So it's not like you can use your other hand.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, when I was younger, I used to use a really heavy ball. I think it was an 18-pounder because I was throwing the ball so fast that I had to slow my motion down. And I still have my ball. I think it's a 16, which I used when I wasn't feeling great. But I'm using my 16 now because I still don't want to do it too, I don't want to go through the motion too fast, but I just can't do the 18 anymore.
Yeah, well, 18's, I mean, just from sheer momentum and force alone, you'll knock over pins with that size of ball.
And there's a Bugs Bunny episode in my brain going where my hand goes with the ball down the alley and I knock all of them down because I'm hitting them.
They still put the kiddie bumpers up for me.
My kids still want those. I'm like, you guys are 15 and 12. I don't really think you.
Yeah.
They're all
need these.
automated now. So it's actually
Yeah.
fun to go, and they come up and go down. They've got LEDs in them. It's actually kind of neat.
Yeah.
So let's get into our topic for today, and it's a really interesting one, and we're going to be talking about talent intelligence. So Alexandra, you mentioned you're a futurist in your introduction. What are we talking about in terms of the future of the world at work? What are your signals? What do you see happening in the world of work today?
Hi, this is Stacey Harris.
And this is Terry Zipper, and we're the host of the two podcasts under the HR Huddle.
On Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, we uncover the latest trends, truths, and challenges from Sapient Insight Group's groundbreaking research and our analyst insights, serving up everything you need to know about HR tech with no sugarcoating.
And on HR, we have a problem. We tackle the toughest workplace challenges head on, offering you expert advice and actionable solutions to help HR leaders thrive in today's fast-changing world. Whether you want the scoop on tech or tools to solve people problems, we've got you covered.
Take a listen and subscribe. If you want to become part of our community, we'd love to see you.
This is such a great question. And I'll take a few minutes to go over what I think are 4 overarching trends.
Sure.
With respect to what we're seeing. And I'm hopeful that this audience is a very knowledgeable, informed group, and that none of this is going to be too much of a surprise, I hope. But these are things that we're seeing today that will definitely be projected into the future, the next 5, 10, probably even 15 years from now. So the first thing is job redesign. We are seeing a lot more of the creation of new job categories. And this is primarily because we need to oversee and manage AI-based machines and integrate humans and machines on teams together. And we need to figure out a way to keep humans in the loop so that when we put a piece of technology into a traditionally human-driven process, it doesn't just run amok, and that it's actually doing what it's intended to do. And because of this, we're seeing these new jobs cross departmental fault lines. So maybe a job might combine HR and IT, for example. And I think that's going to be a skill set in HR that we just don't really have right now. This job redesign, it's happening kind of on an ad hoc basis. But I think it's going to need to be a lot more strategic, and we're going to need to figure out a much better way to do it at scale, because so many of these jobs are going to need to be created. Sure. The next one is employee experience and flexibility. We've always seen, or maybe not always, but in the last several decades, employee experience has become a really essential part of the employee life cycle and engagement. So we see that we have tried to address things like, what's the experience that the candidate goes through during talent acquisition? How are people onboarded? What's the learning and development experience like? How do we do performance management? When we offboard people, how do we do it? But I think we're seeing this being taken to the next level, in that the employee experience of the near future needs to be a combination of high tech and high touch. It needs to be really well integrated. Whereas previously, it was a lot more siloed and transactional. You would have to go 8 different places for your different needs within HR. And I think it's also going to need to focus on the 2 primary themes of purpose and flexibility. Employers are really going to need to drill down into those 2 ideas and craft their employee experience accordingly. The next one shouldn't hopefully be a surprise, and that's this renewed focus on employee well-being. For years and years and years, we viewed employees as commodities. Most organizations are just not accustomed to concerning themselves with aspects of their employees' lives outside the office or outside of their immediate job function. But the pandemic really did change this. It necessitated a much more holistic view of the employer-employee relationship, with a particular emphasis on mental health. What is concerning to me about this one is that I see us going backwards in many respects. I think employers did a fantastic job during the pandemic, but a lot of these benefits are being rolled back now. And I think that's the wrong decision. I think this is only going to become a more critical need. And then the final thing I would cite as a major trend is this very, very rapidly increasing compliance and government regulation situation. I mean, HR compliance has this absurd level of complexity these days. There are hundreds of new regulations associated with, first it was reopening, and then distributed work and travel and vaccination and testing, PPE. And now we're seeing it turn toward the management and regulation of AI. And the thing about this is that these regulations can vary, definitely by country, but also by state, by local jurisdiction. And so as an HR professional, you really have to be in the know about what's going on in your specific area and keep up with it. It's almost like a full-time job for an HR person. So these are just the four major things that I'm seeing drive the future of work, just to give us kind of a place to start with.
And every single one of them could be their own special podcast. Because,
right. Isn't that fun?
because, well, in fact, we have done podcasts on those specific topics because they are essential right now to being able to not just overcome the short term, but to win in long term.
Yes.
And by the way, a lot of these things, they don't live in isolation. They're all interconnected.
Exactly.
And so, and so let's talk a little bit about something that's a little, I guess, beyond this, which is how do you gauge which one is the thing that you need to focus on today? Is there a way of being able to say, listen, I guess my compliance is being helped by our payroll provider or by our general counsel? As far as wellness, we've got a set of programs that seem to work from an engagement perspective. We hear good, positive things about them. Where would you suggest the practitioners actually go to start to actually even understand where they are against all these different things?
I think that's a really good question. And I would say, if I had to pick, it's somewhere in the middle of the first two. This issue of job redesign and also creating a meaningful employee experience. And that actually leads into our topic of talent intelligence, because I think talent intelligence can solve for both of those things. And I think it helps us do these things in a new, more effective way, and most importantly, with large numbers of people. Whereas talent intelligence is something that can be practiced on a kind of a one-to-one basis. You can do it on a small scale, but the real benefit of it is that you can do it on an extremely large scale and get the same results. So I would say that the changing nature of the workforce is such that so many things have to be reconfigured. And what we're seeing now is that, and just virtually every organization, is that organizations don't have a good handle on the skills of their existing workforce. And what that means is that you are laying off tens of thousands of people in one domain and you're struggling to hire in a different domain, instead of figuring out what can the people within my current organization who are loyal and reliable do, and how can I redeploy them? And this is something that's going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening because of the integration of AI. It's going to keep happening because there will be future disruptions. There may be a recession. This is something that every organization needs to be doing, but I think there's a lack of understanding about how to do it, how to assess the needs and the abilities of your workforce, and then how to be more flexible about that, how to do things in a way where you can move people into roles that you might not have ever thought they were capable of, and they might not have ever thought they were capable of. But the intelligence behind the AI here will be able to be a lot more influential, I think, in helping us see more broadly in this area.
Well, and we were just talking about this on another podcast with our internal group in terms of the impact of AI, and as with any major innovation, there's always the fear that it's going to completely displace humans. And where we kind of ultimately landed was along this line where AI is definitely going to replace some of the human function, but it does seem like more companies have that long-term view of exactly what you're talking about, that you really need to reskill your workforce. And that's ultimately what's happened historically too. Anytime the Industrial Revolution, everybody thought humans were going to become obsolete. Well, no, you need people to keep up that AI, to keep programming the AI. You need people on the back end with those kinds of things. But to your point, companies need to have that view. That needs to be in the forefront of their consciousness in order to be ready for that. Otherwise, they'll get caught flat-footed.
Yeah, Dwight, that's exactly right. I'm very fond of saying when people ask this question, is AI going to replace humans? I say, think about every time you've observed a piece of technology being inserted into a traditionally human-driven process. You need a person to design that technology. You need a person to figure out where it goes, to oversee it, to fix it when it breaks, to explain its insights to decision makers. I think I just listed 5 or 6 jobs that were created by that. But what's really the truth here is that you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by a person who can work with AI. And this is in particular important, I think, and this is an area that frequently gets overlooked, for the managers who have to supervise humans working with AI.
Yep.
This is a skill set that nobody has. We only know how to supervise people with pretty limited autonomy and who can do a very specific job, who do not have access to this extraordinarily powerful technology where they can basically do their job in a way that they've never been able to do it before. And you've got to manage that differently. And that's a skill set that you got me. I mean, nobody has that right now. So
exactly. It's so new for us. It's
right. Yeah.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about how talent intelligence does help, especially from a recruiting platform or from a retention perspective?
Sure. So talent intelligence is a form of artificial intelligence that is going across really any source that's either public or private and scraping workforce data and career data from billions and billions of sources and data points. What did somebody do when they started a career in accounting and then they moved to something else? What does the data show about that? What does the data show about do people who work at Deloitte, or do they have the same traits as people who work at Accenture? What are some of the traits that people might have as frontline workers that could be relevant to jobs in other types of industries? And because it has access to so much data, it can make correlations or make distinctions when looking at an individual company's data with respect to what are the skills that are currently in their organization, what are the skills that might be needed in the near future, and most importantly, what skills could be developed by people who already work there in a relatively easy way, maybe through some minimum amount of training, so that those people can be more broadly skilled and more easily redeployed. And one of my favorite examples of this, I was working with a consumer goods company that had a call center that they just could not keep people in this call center. They could not staff this call center. Sure. Nobody needed to work. No one needed or wanted to work in the call center, at least in their current recruiting model. It just wasn't really working out. So what they found through talent intelligence, though, was that they were in a geographic location where a lot of restaurants and bars had closed because the downtown area was in this state of, I guess, a little bit of decline. And there were a lot of bartenders that were out of work. And what they learned is bartenders actually have a lot of the same skills as call center people. They've got problem solving and multitasking and interpersonal skills and good listening, active listening skills. And that's a leap that I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with us as humans, but humans wouldn't make that leap. Whereas talent intelligence tell you, hey, let's get all these bartenders and just train them in how to answer calls. And then we can have a talent pool, have access to people that we would not have had otherwise. And I think that's a great example of how it can work. It can really turn things around in a situation where you just cannot hire the people that you need.
So it's a great example, but one of the things, and I'll challenge talent intelligence on a few different things, but one of the most important ones is from the very beginning of this podcast, we've always talked about the fact that data, especially about people, is crap, especially in its unaudited form. And one of the things that scares me about building models, and I've built tons of models, especially when it came to doing predictive analytics, it always scares me, especially in an unaudited world, of especially using data science, lots of large data sets, that we get bias and we have bad data and we have, well, actually extreme bias built into the data sets, which then go to influence the models and influence the outcomes. So how does talent intelligence fix that or adjust for those kinds of biases?
I think you make a really good point in that when we look at who the programmers are for AI or really for any type of technology, I mean, just think about the audience. It's 90% Caucasian or Asian men between the ages of 25 and 40. Right. So you already see that bias is being naturally baked into these programs because you just have such a limited perspective of people who are involved in the process. Right. So that is one thing. I think having, and this is another area where I've actually seen tremendous improvement over just the last 12 months, the organizations really starting to step up their oversight of AI-driven programs, and this would include talent intelligence programs, to have ethical guardrails in place to make sure they are checking it for bias, because at any time you could have the AI telling you, okay, well, just because all of these people who were successful in this role in the past were Caucasian, that means that you should hire all Caucasians from now on. I mean, right. AI is only as good as our ability to interpret it. And again, this goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning around oversight. Like, you cannot just set and forget this stuff. You have to be looking at every piece of data that comes out of there and making a value judgment about whether this is actually something you can use or not. At least that's what I think. And I've kind of been banging this drum of oversight for many years now. But now it's starting to actually be regulated where, and I think this is another kind of foresight point, I don't think you're going to be able to use this technology in a few years without some pretty strict guidelines around it. I don't. I think right now we're a little bit in the Wild West where it's up to the employer to do what they think is best. And I don't think that's going to continue.
We're still figuring it out, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's also led to lawsuits. I mean, there's a pending legislation right now with Workday regarding the AI built into its recruiting technology. And one of the interesting pieces of this is basically Workday's response is, look, we're building a technology, but then it's up to the implementation teams and the company who now runs or leases this technology to, develop the skills necessary to monitor or configure this stuff.
And the thing is, they're right about that. If you actually look at the law in most current jurisdictions, it is the responsibility of the employer. So it's easy to say, oh my gosh, like, I didn't know the technology did this. Let's blame the vendor. At the end of the day, the employer is the one that's liable. So that's why I tell them, like, you can't, they're probably going to lose that lawsuit.
You can't kick the can down the road on that one. You've got to take responsibility for it. And
but Dwight, I'm not actually sure that it's necessarily true, because I hate to use this kind of a draconian comparison, but gun manufacturers have been found liable in certain instances where their guns were modified in certain ways to kill in a specific way. And so while that's not exactly 100% of an analogy.
Well, that's a heck of an analogy, dude.
But if we look at the application of the technology in the way in which it was intended,
right,
that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I think, Alexandra, to your point before, until or unless the people who are developing these systems and the algorithms out of the box, because a lot of times they're implemented out of the box. If they're not implemented correctly, we might find that the results of the algorithms predict what exists, and what exists is biased decisions. And so, you don't have to be a futurist or a rocket scientist or a podcaster to see where this may go, in terms of, credit applications and other things where algorithms exist and have been built in isolation from these other factors. But those things are also highly regulated as well. And they've been fashioned over decades. But still a lot of times they turn out to be biased.
Yeah, I mean, that is accurate. And I think that's why everyone involved in the process needs to be paying attention to this, and also its potential to augment, like you said, the bias that already exists that's human driven. We have to be using this as a force for good. And I think it can be used as a force for good, but not without some significant forethought. And that's why, I don't know, I get so prickled by the whole idea of AI just coming over and taking over for people, because it's actually the exact opposite. The more we use this technology, the more we really need sophisticated human assessment of what's going on.
Well, let's actually talk about that. Let's talk about what a good example might be of a talent intelligence system that's actually doing what we're hoping it to do and where it's actually working well.
Well, I love to use government examples because, frankly, you typically do not see the public sector being cutting edge in anything really related to technology.
That's
but
true.
In the public sector, talent intelligence has really taken off, and it's taken off for a couple of reasons, namely need, because there are two things that might not seem like they can be simultaneously solved, but talent intelligence does solve for both of them. And the first one is in the US states, there are certain states that employers want to move out of because they cannot get the talent that they need. So they want to move geographically. So they want to leave the state and, have the state lose all of the benefits associated with having a large employer. And at the same time, in those same states, you have high unemployment, you have chronic unemployment, you have people who want to move because they can't get a job.
Right.
And so you're like, okay, well, we have all these employers over here with jobs who are going to leave, and we have all these people who are unemployed. How can we match them? And in a traditional system, it would be very difficult to match them because you have, for example, a bunch of convenience store workers who want to do something else or want to develop a career, but they figure they're going to be in this dead-end frontline worker position for the rest of their lives. And you've got companies, I mean, the best example I've got is healthcare organizations. They just can't find anyone.
Right.
And you feel like there's no logical connection between the two, when in fact, and this has happened in both the state of New York and the state of Indiana, when they put the talent intelligence system together and they had the employers post their jobs and they had all their people fill out profiles, the system was able to tell them with some degree of accuracy, okay, well, if you're a convenience store worker and you want to become a phlebotomist in a hospital, like, here's the 2 courses that you need to take. And with some extra human support with respect to how they could actually make that move, they were able to pipeline a whole bunch more people into those open jobs that employers had and keep them from leaving the state because they could now find people. So my favorite examples are, I mean, a lot of private sector companies doing this too, but that's my favorite because I love to see the public sector and government doing things that benefits citizens. And I think that they've really been out in front on this, frankly.
In the world of remote work, there's no reason why people have to be co-located. There are moves in that way. I'd love to get the futurist view of that at some point, but
I'm happy to give the futurist view on that.
But before we get there, think about the agricultural work that happens outside cities, right? And all the skills that are built into those towns that exist that are struggling because of the family farm moving to more corporate farming and the selling out and what happens with that. Most of this country is agricultural anyways. So I know it doesn't seem feasible, but it's true. You get outside the city, half hour to an hour, it's all farms. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. But anyways, my point is that there are skills in those towns, even though those towns seem like ghost towns for the most part, because there is no infrastructure there. But there could be. And I think that goes to where you were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those people have a set of skills that can be used in farming that could also be used elsewhere. Now, what concerns me about this, though, I know it's biases is probably what concerns you the most, but what concerns me the most is that these aren't logical conclusions that people are just going to come to on their own. And this requires a lot of hand-holding to get people to see what they are in fact capable of and to skill up enough to be able to take on a new career path.
Right.
And there's going to be, at the end of the day, people who are motivated to do this and capable of doing it, and there's going to be people who aren't. So it's the people who aren't that I'm very concerned about. I have a very bright view of talent intelligence and what it's capable of doing. I just don't think it's going to be 100% effective in getting people whose jobs are becoming obsolete to move on. I think that that's going to be a much taller order, if I'm being very honest. And
It's really the psychological aspect of things.
Well, it could also be the economic too, though, Dwight. Right?
Yes.
Because, money talks, BS walks, as I think someone, who actually said that? But somebody with money said, money talks.
Somebody with money.
Yes, somebody with money said it. But Alexandra, I mean, couldn't that also play into it where, look, there are no jobs, there's no money, and, government assistance, it's not a long tail. So, could that actually push people to say, maybe I should be adventurous and see if there's another role for me somewhere else?
yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that both things will happen, actually. I do think we need more government assistance. I mean, this is, I guess, the liberal in me a little bit for these folks. But I also hope that as we get the word out about things like this, that people will see, hey, why couldn't I do something like that? Why couldn't I move from being a frontline convenience store worker to entry level in a hospital? And the thing is, once you get into an industry, you can then start moving up. So they have career mobility in a way that they never would have had before. It's just making that initial step that I think is going to be challenging for some people, depending on, I mean, what, as you said, psychologically, depending on your personality, depending on how old you are. I mean, I hate to say that people who are older are going to be stuck in their ways more, but we're already seeing that with this return to work
What do you mean?
tug of war. I mean, we're seeing this cut across age lines big time. And so, and it has a lot to do with people being kind of stuck in their ways and only being willing to do things how they're used to doing them. And that's my concern with people being able to reskill into a different area, even if the jobs are plentiful and available.
Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast. A free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today.
So let's talk about what some organizations are doing and what some people can do today to actually make use or to take advantage of this. What push do they need?
Well, first of all, I would say to look around, both in your government employment services, and if you're currently working in an organization, see what your organization is doing with respect to internal mobility, because there is this, I think it's actually a warranted stereotype, frankly, that internal mobility is really difficult to do, that it's hard to move from one department to another. And I think the reason for that is A, people or managers are guilty of talent hoarding, but also that there just hasn't been an infrastructure in place for people to move easily. And a lot of organizations, especially after what happened in the pandemic, are stepping this up big time. So looking around at what is currently available to you, I just did a piece of research that showed that something like 40% of people currently working in an organization are aware of another opportunity within the organization that's in a different department that might be a better fit for their skill set. So the fact is the awareness of this is growing, and you just need the mechanism to make it happen. So I think that's where I would start as an individual, is to look at what's already being built around you, because chances are somewhere there's something that can help you do this. And this is changing more by the day. I mean, there's already more talent intelligence systems being implemented today than there were 6 months ago. So it's not this super new experimental thing anymore. I think it's something that's being practically integrated into a lot of organizations and, of course, government. So if you're a frontline worker who doesn't have access to, who's not a knowledge worker, doesn't have access to this, there very well could be a place for you to put your profile and the things you're interested in and your skills so that employers can find you.
I would also add that managers need to understand hoarding's a bad thing, and the culture needs to change, and guidelines need to change to encourage managers to let those reins go, because that's not a good thing.
That's right. I mean, it's for the benefit of the company. Look at it that way instead of just like your individual benefit. And that person, it's only going to be a benefit the more broadly skilled they are. Maybe they'll come back to work in your group again and they'll have all these extra skills. It's like to keep those people in the organization is really, that's what you should be going for. And I think this is changing. I really, really do. It's just, this is a very entrenched cultural thing that we are struggling a little bit to get over.
Well, Alexandra, this has all been awesome. And I think we could go on for hours talking about all these individual pieces. Before we end today, is there any one piece you didn't cover that you wanted to talk a little bit more about?
I think you briefly asked this, David, but we didn't quite get to it in detail. But I am being asked on the speaking circuit a lot now to tell employees to come back to work.
Encouraged or told to?
Well, I'm being asked to do it from kind of a futurist perspective where it's like, well, the future of work is that we're all going back 5 days a week, 9 to 5. And it's troubling to me that I'm being asked that because not only do I just think that's false, but I think this pushing the square peg into the round hole, we are never going to go back to that degree of rigidity. And while I, of course, think there are benefits to being in person at certain times, for certain reasons, it should be much more fluid with respect to how you structure it. And I think there's really no way around that. If you look at the DEI&B implications of forcing people to come into an office, if you look at the sheer costs associated with that, and the fact that we're going to have these labor shortages, massive knowledge worker labor shortages in the years to come. You're not going to be able to keep people if you don't have any degree of flexibility. So I think this very stubborn attitude of, I want as a leader, because I've got a corner office and it's easy for me to come to work, I want everybody back because I don't really fully trust them. I don't think they're productive. You can find all kinds of data in either direction, frankly, but really it comes down to having a workforce that you can trust to do their work and to also live their lives. And so that's the one thing I just want to point out, because I'm actually surprised at how much pushback I'm getting on this point.
That's interesting. I mean, we're definitely seeing it over and over in the news as these companies start to push people back. And in my estimation, the genie's out of the bottle. You're not putting the genie back on that one.
That's exactly right, Dwight. I believe so too. And it's not to say you shouldn't go back at all, but it just has to be more nuanced.
Right. Well, exactly.
Well, to me, there's a bigger problem, which is the misogynist nature of the rules, right?
Right.
Sorry, it's bullshit that it disproportionately affects women. And what we saw with the pandemic and the amount of work and the amount of support that that female workers got with the disproportionate amount that they were responsible for childcare, as well as keeping their day job 100%, at the same level of productivity. And then a lot of female workers left the workforce, and we still see weakness there. Yep. It's just the same old misogynist rule.
Yeah, and COVID is still going on. People forget about that. I mean, my kid's dad has had COVID for 2 weeks, and I've had my kids for 2 weeks because they haven't been able to go over there because we're trying to. It's like this is still affecting our lives.
Yeah, this is still a reality for us, and will continue to be a reality for us.
But beyond that, though, Alexandra, it's not just about the pandemic. The pandemic opened our eyes to it, but the lack of flexibility that we've given workers in being able to be humans and take care of our kids. At the same time, I still have to apologize for the fact that I'm a single dad and I have to take my kid and coach my kid's hockey team. So at 4 o'clock, I have to leave work and go and coach his team. Well, I have to apologize for not being able to be on meetings beyond 4 o'clock. All right, well, I start work at 8, so I should get some dispensation. Look, now salary.com is very flexible and they're not the ones pushing, but I still get attitude. And what's funny is I get attitude from lots of different people from different backgrounds as well. Suffice to say, I don't think the return to work is what employers want it to be because they want to command and control people again. They want it to be that way.
That's right. And it's more complicated to do it the other way. I mean, to be fair, to have a more individualized way of managing people and a structure that is more flexible according to the needs of the particular group or individual, I mean, that is tougher. It is easier to make a decision like, okay, we're all doing this. But the days of that are over. And we need to accept that, particularly because, as you said, David, COVID is not the last disruption.
No.
Right.
I actually got asked flat out, well, what do you think is the next disruption? I'm like, climate.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
the climate is going to make it impossible for us to be in a given location every single day at a reliable period. People don't want to hear that, but that's already happening.
But we've seen it happen this year. It's not like it's a future issue.
Right.
It's actually happening.
Yes.
Exactly. Over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Look what happened on the West Coast with the flooding that happened. Was that something that was isolated to 1 week? No. And what's even worse is there are still people who are displaced from that. And we're just not listening to it because it didn't happen, Hawaii, basically. We're still not covering the fact that we lost tons of people and we lost tons of infrastructure and we lost an entire city in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So anyway, so sorry, so off the soapbox.
No, I mean, I obviously agree with you. This stuff is going to keep happening and we have to become more flexible, not less flexible, because things are not going to go according to the very reliable and predictable way they did in the past. It's just not going to happen. I know we would all like that because humans hate change, but
exactly.
What are you
we've been in a constant state of change now for probably 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You talked about the Industrial Revolution before. It's constant now.
Right.
The fact is, when I went to, along one last point, when I went to interview for a car company back in 1990 something, and they had one computer that the entire human resource team shared. And I said,
Wow.
I already have a laptop, which was something I could move around, but it was gigantic, but it was a laptop. I said, why am I going to go to a place where I'm going to have to share that computer as a compensation analyst that I'm going to need on a daily basis? And the answer was, well, that's how we do work here. Well, think about that office, at least 2 years in the future from that. They didn't hire me because of that. In the same way, Alexandra, we're not going to use AI. Okay. Well, your competitors are.
Right.
You're going to, you just don't realize you're going to. And in a couple of years, when everybody else is doing it and making, huge productivity gains from it, that's going to come back on you.
Yep.
So, not you, Alexandra. I meant you, the people.
I gotcha.
You, the people.
I gotcha.
Anyways, thank you so much. You're awesome. As you can tell, we all get very passionate about this topic. So we're going to have to ask you back again because we had so much fun.
Yeah.
That would be
great.
delightful. I love being among kindred spirits. So thank you both for having me today.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Dwight.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us today, Alexandra.
You're very welcome.
Thank you all very much for listening. Take care and stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.